Television Network presents Jim and Tammy.
Praise the Lord. See the things that He has done. Praise the Lord. For the battle has been won. Together we'll make it. Together we will praise the Lord.
Come on now, let's have a great big welcome for Jim and Tammy Bakker.
Music sharing.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Heritage USA. It's nice to have you here. My, what a wonderful audience.
What an opening, right? So in case you haven't figured out, we're going to be talking about Jim and Tammy Bakker. Now listen, this is not going to be a deep dive into this couple. This is just going to be my experience with them and what I know of their ministry. So let's just pick up with Jim and Tammy meeting. They met at Bible College in 1960 in Minnesota, don't you know? And they fell in love. They both had a heart for God, for people, and they wanted to minister. And that's kind of large part what kind of drew them together. And that's what they did for a while. They went out on the road. They would do revivals. They would preach the gospel. And eventually they would get into TV. They got their start with Pat Robertson and the Christian Broadcasting Network. They had a very popular children's show where Tammy would do puppets. And, here's the thing about Tammy Faye. She was a very charismatic woman. She was a very sweet woman. She kind of had this Lucille Ball type essence to her that kind of drew people in. And so I think she was played a pivotal role in their success. So after they left Pat Robertson's network, they went on to TBN, the Trinity Broadcasting Network. They helped get that station running and off the ground. With Paul and Jan Krauss. They had a falling out. They would leave there. And at this point, they were like, you know what? Maybe we should start our own network. So they moved to the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and that's what they did. They started the PTL Satellite Network, and they had a talk show called the PTL Club, which was a little bit like this Tonight Show, right? Jim Bakker, these people were rubbing elbows with celebrities, with presidents, and they were making Christianity seem cool. So Jim was also a builder. He loved to build things. So he got this idea, why don't we build a Christian amusement park? And that's what they did. And it was, at the time, was the third largest amusement park in the United States. Now here's where my experience with them comes in. My grandmother was very religious, and she was very much into televangelists. And I spent a lot of time with her as a child. So, and she gave money to these people. Anyway, she would take me to Heritage USA once a year. And I have to tell you, it was a pretty cool place. They had a water park. They had a castle. They had this cute little Main Street area that had boutique shops. They had a hotel. And every time we would go, we would go to a taping of the show, and we would meet with Jim and Tammy afterwards, shake their hands, and et cetera, et cetera. And I had some of Tammy Faye's albums. I like them. They seem like good people. Again, I was a child at the time, so what do I know? I mean, you know how I am with people even today, right? I give everybody the benefit of the doubt, so that hasn't changed. But anyway, as often happens when people get a lot of fame and a lot of money, they start losing sight of who they are. And, with Jim and Tammy, what was the original purpose of starting this ministry? They started living a very extravagant lifestyle. They had a house on the lake. They had cars. They would travel. At one point, they had an air conditioning doghouse. I mean, if you want your dog to have air conditioning, just bring the dog inside, okay? Now, one thing that Tammy Faye did that I thought was really beautiful, this was the time when AIDS was kind of on the scene and new, and people didn't understand much about it. And she would have people on the show who had AIDS. She would minister to them. She would hug them. She wasn't afraid. And she really helped dispel some myths about AIDS, which was a really beautiful thing that she did. And, later on in her life, she would actually become a gay icon. But we'll get to that. But first, let's get to the downfall. So, and let's talk a little bit about Jimmy Swaggart. Jimmy Swaggart was also a televangelist, Pentecostal guy. He and Jim were both in the Assembly of Gods. And so Jim had a sex scandal, and Jimmy Swaggart played a role in bringing this to light and also getting Jim Bakker kicked out of the Assembly of Gods. Now, here's the ironic thing. A couple years later, Jimmy Swaggart would be found going to prostitutes in New Orleans. The hypocrisy of these guys, the shadiness of these guys. So anyway, the sex scandal involved the church secretary, Jessica Hahn. Jessica Hahn came forth and said that Jim Bakker and one of his associates raped her. And come to find out, they had given her hush money prior to this. Jim denied this. He said, yes, there was sexual misconduct, but I did not rape this woman. So this was a huge, because people were like, what the heck? Nobody expected this, right? So Jim got on his show. He cried. Tammy's by his side. I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. But he knew that he needed to leave the ministry for a while, let this die down. So he needed someone to take over. He didn't want Jimmy Swaggart to do it because Jimmy Swaggart, didn't trust him. So he brought in Jerry Falwell, another televangelist. Jerry Falwell, this man was shady as F. He looked a little bit like a cross between a Teletubby and Elmer Fudd. And even as a child, this guy I was like, ew. I don't know. There was something about him. So anyway, Jerry came in, took over, and played a big part in the financial crimes coming out. And, kudos to him for that. But he also did this man dirty. He would spread false rumors about Jim and, just basically tried to destroy him. So when the financial crimes came to light, there was a court case. And come to find out, so I mentioned there was a hotel there, right? Jim Bakker would sell lifetime memberships to Heritage USA. And so you could come to the park and stay at the hotel, for 3 days, 4 nights, or something like that. But here's the thing. He kept selling these memberships after he had already sold them out, right? At one point, he was making, people were sending him $1 million a week. $1 million a week! So Jim Bob, ended up going to prison. The judge sentenced him to 45 years originally because the judge just wasn't having it. He was very religious himself, and he didn't like shysters. So he had a bias against him. This sentence would get overturned during the appeal process, and his sentence was reduced to 8 years. During this time, Tammy Faye would divorce him. She would go on to marry one of his friends and someone who actually worked at PTL. She would go on The Surreal Life, which was a reality show. She had her own talk show with Jim J. Bullock. She wrote a book, The Eyes of Tammy Faye. She did a documentary. And we really got to see the real Tammy Faye. And she wore a lot of makeup and stuff, but we found out that was because she was really insecure. And there was just a vulnerability about this woman that was really endearing. There was just something about her that was just so loving and so good and so kind that you couldn't help not like her. And she got made fun of a lot too, right? Because of all the makeup, right? But she just, I don't know, she always just had a good attitude about it. And unfortunately, she would die relatively young, in my opinion, of cancer. So as for Jim, he would spend the 8 years in prison, reading his Bible, getting back in touch with God. And when he came out, he did an interview with Barbara Walters, and you thought, oh my gosh, this guy has really changed, He denounced the prosperity gospel. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically where ministers say, hey, give to the church and you will prosper. Give to my ministry, right? So he denounced that. And for a while, he was working in inner cities. I know he was working in LA with gangs and living a humble lifestyle. He would go on to remarry a woman, Lori, who is a replica of Tammy Faye, in my opinion. And they would minister. But eventually, he wanted to get back into TV. So they moved to Missouri. He started another TV show. He started building things again. And even though he had denounced the prosperity gospel, he now had a new gospel, doomsday gospel. Y'all, the end of the world is coming. We got to be prepared for it. And he started selling doomsday kits to these vulnerable people who watch him, right? Who, probably don't have the money to be spending on doomsday kits. This kind of fear-based gospel. We got to prepare, y'all. And then COVID hit, and he really took advantage of that, the pandemic. He was selling this concoction that had silver in it. And here's the thing, silver in small doses can be good for you. But this wasn't regulated, this product. He was claiming that it could cure COVID, high blood pressure, just all these ailments, right? It could cure without any scientific proof. He would get in trouble for this. He had to pay, it was just like $150,000 and not sell it anymore. But he's still selling stuff. He's still hawking his doomsday kits. Basically, Jim Bakker learned nothing. He's back to conning people. He had a stroke, and I'm very sorry about that. And his wife, basically, when he came back, he said, it's just because I've been so maligned and people are so mean to me, and, they're persecuting me. Here's the thing. He never takes responsibility or accountability, right? Or if he does, he'll do it for like a hot minute and then, nope. It's just everybody's out to get him. And it's really, really sad because he's still preying on the vulnerable and on the, people who want to believe and want to have faith, right? It's just a really sad thing. And I'm going to include a clip of him selling one of these kits, and he looks quite a bit different, but he's still got that Jim Bakker essence to him. So we're going to end on that. If y'all have made it this far, thank you for listening. I know that I ramble and I'm all over the place, but I just had to share because these people played a pivotal role in my childhood, believe it or not. Anyway, until next time, y'all, be well.
For global market crash strikes 1 minute to midnight. You hear that, John?
Bible says you're going to throw gold and silver in the streets. Tomorrow, we could look back and say, yesterday was the last day to order and get prepared.
This offer comes with 22 buckets, plus a bonus of 6 additional buckets for a total of 28 buckets.
I want to show you something. All this food is for a gift of $2,500.